I declare the House in committee for Point of order, John Boscawen.
I noticed that the three bills have been taken together. I understood that...
No.
Mr. Speaker, I understood that we're only taking the first two bills together.
My understanding is that's not the case.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Speaking point of order, Mr. Speaker.
I'll hear the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
The committee on all three, and then they're taken separately in committee. All right?
That's the way it works. So I declare the House in committee for consideration of the Electoral Finance Reform and Advanced Voting Amendment Bill, the Parliamentary Service Amendment Bill, and the Electoral Referendum Bill.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
No. Members, the House is a committee on the electoral... Members, the House is a committee on the Electoral Finance Reform and Advanced Voting Amendment Bill, the Parliamentary Service Amendment Bill and the Electoral Referendum Bill. Members, we move first to the Electoral Finance Reform and Advanced Voting Amendment Bill. And the question is that Part 1 stand apart. I call the Honourable Leanne Dalzell.
Mr. Chairman, I thought I'd just take an initial call on this legislation. Obviously, it probably would have been more convenient to deal with the three pieces of legislation at once, because really there are some issues that are particular issues that really relate to all three bills. And when we get to the Parliamentary Service Amendment Bill, I think that will be dealt with relatively quickly, since we weren't able to join them up together. The electoral finance legislation, though, the two major issues in respect to that bill is in relation to the question of third-party limits on expenditure, and it was very important to this side of the House that some movement was shown in this regard. And the reason that we wanted to have some movement in this area is that, and there was some debate at the Select Committee about whether or not advertising did make a difference in terms of the outcomes of election. Then we were referred to a number of pieces of research that had been done in this particular area. But I think that the statement that the Royal Commission made back in 1986, I think it was, is as valid today as it was then, which is, it isn't so much even whether or not the third-party expenditure is a question. It's not. The question isn't whether the third-party expenditure is entirely responsible for the result of the vote. The real issue, I think, at the end of the day, is whether there is a perception that the use of vast sums of money in order to influence the outcome is sufficient. So is the perception sufficient to give the impression that the outcome of the election has been affected by the spend, and whether or not that actually leads to a lack of confidence in the integrity of the electoral system itself. So I'm very strongly of the view that it's important to have third-party expenditure caps, because it really doesn't make it effective for the caps that apply to political parties and to candidates if a third party can simply enter into the fray with negative advertising against the other side without any limitation on what it is that they could do. Now, we had quite a lengthy debate about what the cap would be, and there weren't that many submissions on this particular bill that related to the third-party expenditure. And it was interesting because the real debate was around the lack of a cap on the third of the bills, which is why it would be more convenient to debate all three of these together, but there you go. And I think that the reason that the focus of the submissions was on the referendum rather than on the electoral finance reform bill was because in the referendum situation there is access to television advertising, and that's where that uncapped expenditure of course would come into play. And I think that it wouldn't take much for people to work out how much association between the political party advertising and the MMP advertising, or the referendum advertising, could in fact be made to kind of look like an extension of a political party's campaign. And when you do think about it in terms of some of the interests of those that are going to be entering into the debate on the electoral system itself, then obviously some parties have a greater interest in the MMP outcome being retained. But anyway, moving back to why it's important to have third-party expenditure, or to have more than just the registration, but to have the caps on third-party expenditure. I think you need to go back to the 2005 general election, which is one that I campaigned in, obviously, and it was one that I found to be an extremely unpleasant election campaign. In fact, in all of the election campaigns I've stood in, that is the one that really will go down in my memory as the most misogynist and it was self-interest. It was the promotion of self-interest that I never came across on street corner meetings in all the years I've stood. I mean, I've been a Member of Parliament for 20 years this year, and I have never, apart from that election, had people on street corner meetings saying, "What's in it for me?" And that was the only time, and it was generated, Mr Chairman.
Call the Honourable Leanne Dalzell.
It was generated out of a campaign that had been run on three different levels, and the first level was designed to make sure that the campaign expenditure fell outside the regulated period. So that was number one. And they were the billboards. Do you remember the billboards? I don't know whether colleagues remember them, but there was one that really sticks in my mind, sticks in my throat actually, and that was the one that was headed up Iwi Kiwi. All of the billboards were actually designed to send a message to the public of New Zealand, which was to create a sense of division, them and us. And everyone was exposed to this them and us all the way through that year. And so it started at the beginning of the year with the campaign billboards. Now, who designed those? Was that Stephen Joyce before he came to Parliament? Yeah. So, and I think they had some really good. Who were those people from Australia? Crosby Textor. That's right. And so they were responsible for developing this campaign, which set off the year with a real antagonistic view, us and them, and that Iwi Kiwi one was the one that was designed to cause the most racial division within our country that I think we've seen for a very, very long time. And so we had the photoshopped image, the very nasty photoshopped image of the Prime Minister of the day up against this very warm and engaging. We all remember Don Brash looking warm and engaging, and so that was the dichotomy that was set up through the billboard. So we had that was the groundwork that was done, and it was done deliberately outside. It was setting the stage for the rest of the campaign, but it was actually designed to take us into the election campaign period where the expenditure would start to count. So they spent a fortune, millions of dollars on this campaign all around the country in order to set the scene for what was to come. And what was to come also included another deliberate avoidance of our electoral finance laws, and that was the engagement with the exclusive brethren. Now, we know because of the Hollow Men, and I do recommend that people read that again. I've been recommended to read it again lately, and I'm going to do that over the summer holidays because we do need to be reminded about who knew what, when, how and why, and it is very explicit in terms of the trail of emails that were exposed in that legislation, in that book rather. That's exactly what happened. And the exclusive brethren went to the Electoral Commission with a design for their pamphlet which had Don Brash's face on it, promoting him as the next Prime Minister of New Zealand. And when they found out that that would then have to have National Party approval and it would count against their campaign expenditure, they went away and designed something that never mentioned that.